Well, you are now looking live at Ottawa, where the public inquiry into foreign interference in the most recent Canadian elections is resuming this hour. In every election, a group of civil servants is tasked with looking for signs of foreign interference. And if they find them, the panel is supposed to sound the alarm. Today, we will hear from the people who had that responsibility in 2019 and 2021. The CBC's Janice McGregor, is covering the inquiry for us, and she joins us now live with more on this. So, Janice, good morning. We learned, of course, on Friday that foreign interference was going on, that it was happening. So walk us through what this panel was briefed on and what the Commission is trying to discover now.
Yeah, this all has to do with the caretaker convention that's supposed to apply during a political campaign. This idea that if there is a serious threat to the integrity of a vote, the decision whether or not to inform the public shouldn't rest in the hands of elected officials who may have some kind of partisan considerations in deciding when that threshold for an alert is met. So instead, it was put in the hands of this panel of five. There's five very senior bureaucrats in front of us today. The panel for 2021 was slightly different, but it was composed in both cases of people at the deputy minister level of the federal government, very experienced people who, as you say, were given the clearances and had briefings from the security task force in charge of monitoring for election threats. At the start of this testimony, they talked about how, in effect, the main point of this panel was to set someone up to, quote, ring the bell to the public. They made it clear that there was no one on this panel that had individual veto power, that they tried to work through consensus decision-making, and they had a specific protocol that they would go through to decide when the threshold was met for sounding such an alarm. But the interesting thing, as we start to go through with them at the inquiry today, what they heard and their decision-making processes, is that perhaps we incorrectly assumed, when no warning was given, that there was no significant foreign interference, because the intelligence coming out in document form and also orally at this inquiry, especially last Thursday and Friday, really lays out some pretty interesting specific examples. I've written them up for CBC Online. You can go over to our page and check them out in full. But just very briefly, Hillary, I'll just go over a few examples of what I'm talking about. A couple days into the 2021 campaign, for example, a member of Parliament reported, quote, cultivation and elicitation attempts by an official of a foreign state, although they don't tell us what country we're talking about. Separately, in what was characterized by a representative of CSIS, Canada's spy agency, as a very textbook example of foreign interference, the panel of five was told at the end of August that there was an incident both during and after the election where an individual from the People's Republic of China was intervening in support of a particular candidate, but they don't tell us which candidate. They also don't tell us what party that candidate was from. But separately, we also were given on Friday a very heavily redacted briefing document based on a briefing provided only to officials who were given clearance from the Liberal Party of Canada. This was not something shared with the other parties. And they were told that they wanted to do this for, quote, awareness and action on the part of the party. Finally, we also last week at this inquiry learned that there were specific foreign interference attempts by a proxy agent of the government of India. That has been discussed in additional documents since then. And interestingly, they at one point refer to this perhaps being interference in a way that could be considered a potential criminal code offense. Why is that interesting? Well, last week, the RCMP was in front of this inquiry, and they said they still have open files pertaining to the 2021 election, but we have no way to know if those open files have to do with this other suggestion that there was intelligence pertaining to an Indian proxy agent that was passed on to the RCMP.
Okay, so Janice, tell us a little bit about this panel of national security advisors that are set to testify today.
Yeah, so that will be something that happens a little bit later on this afternoon at the end of the day. We will hear from the person who was the advisor to the Prime Minister during the 2019 election, during the 2021 election, and the National Security Advisor in the interim between those two. Justin Trudeau has turned over his National Security Advisor quite a bit. Most interesting from this panel, at least for me, will be to see what they say about one of the most interesting things we learned last week, which was that CSIS Justice recalled a key intelligence assessment about the interference allegations in the riding in Toronto of Don Valley North. And that recall happened after a conversation with the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, presumably in the fall of 2019. What was it about that conversation that caused that intelligence to be pulled back? The CSIS director said they don't pull back intelligence following any kind of external pressure. It was some decision the intelligence agency reached on its own after that meeting. Nevertheless, fascinating to learn that they pulled the intelligence back, and we'll see if we get any more details about what it was about that assessment that they felt they no longer wanted to have out there. I will say, though, as we get through the afternoon, you've been talking about the eclipse all morning. Commissioner Marie-Josée Ugg is well aware that there might be some people here at this inquiry who do want to take in this historic moment and maybe look at the sky for a bit. She was saying this morning she's going to try and rejig the schedule a bit, make sure she times the break this afternoon real well. Take a listen.
I imagine there's probably many among us that would like to look at this. I don't know if I should say look, but to be outside for this event. I see what we can do.
So I don't know if any of the lawyers or journalists at this inquiry have glasses in their laptop bags, but looks like she's going to try and help them out if they want to take a break, look at the sky, think about other things for a few minutes.
Eclipse fever everywhere we go today, Janice. Okay, thank you so much for this. The CBC's Janice McGregor for us there in Ottawa.